Hi, I'm Laura Henry, and I am a craft dabbler, and I'm also an independent, close to my heart consultant. And today I have a really fun project using my gel printing plate and some homemade stencils using the Cricut and the Artistry cartridge from Close to My Heart. So here are the cutouts that I used from that cartridge, and I'm going to show you up above in a minute. The two white ones are the ones that I used to make my stencils, and I cut out transparency sheets to make those stencils, and the rest of those cutouts I used foil paper and glitter paper to embellish the fronts of my card. So let's begin. I'm using that gel printing plate and that brayer, and the brayer I use to move the paint around on that gelatin plate, and then I'm going to put the paper onto it, and it transfers the paint onto the paper, and these are going to be used for my backgrounds. And I've pre-cut a stack of papers 4¼ by 5½, and some of them I cut down, or well, all of them I cut down, and then I matted them with some of the glitter papers to fit on the fronts of my card. And for my cards, I used the pre-folded and pre-cut card bases and envelopes from the Close to My Heart catalog. And so what I do is I am using different paints, and you can use whatever paints you have. And then I put a little bit onto that printing plate, and then I use the brayer to mix them, and then I put the paper down onto it, and I'm pretty much using that as my first background. And then I'm going to layer the paper up later using the stencils to create some designs on top of the base colors. And you can also use odds and ends around your house. That my turkey came in that last year for Thanksgiving, and I'm using it there as kind of a mask to make a pretty pattern onto my paper. So there I'm using tissue paper, and I wadded it up, and I'm blotting the paint around to create kind of a textured effect. I didn't really like it. So the thing with this is, if you don't like something, you just keep layering over it until you get what you like, or you don't have to use it. So I painted more backgrounds than I actually used. And that is a piece of, I'm not really sure what it's used for. It came from the craft section, probably at Walmart, and I just cut off a piece, and I specifically bought it for gel printing. So I always am keeping my eye out for textured objects that I can use with this. And on that one, you can see it's white around the edges, and so when I use the brayer on the back of it to press the paper fully into the plate, I get better coverage. But I don't really mind those white spots because it just adds extra texture onto the background. So sometimes I use it on the back of the paper, and sometimes I don't. So that's just a piece of tissue paper that I've recycled from some presents, and I'm using that to clean off my plate in between my prints. And so sometimes it leaves behind paint from the print from before, and I kind of like that because then it gives a different look to it. So some of that has some darker blue in it, and then sometimes you get paint chunks in it, or lines from the previous cleaning from the tissue paper, and it just adds a lot of different interest and a lot of different texture to the look. So there I've used the brayer to fully push the paper into that printing plate and the paint, and I got a full coverage on that. And so I picked out fall colors for this because I wanted these to be sort of fall themed. And some of the paint that I used has some iridescence to it, and I just really love that look. And then some of the papers that I used um, to jazz up the end paper are sparkly papers, and I just love it with the iridescence. So now I'm using the stencil that I made with my Close to My Heart cartridge, and see there I turned it over so the painted side is on the card, and you can use it like that as well. And it's a very light paint transfer when you do it that way. But then you can, on this print, I'm getting 3 uses out of this. So there I'm putting it into the paint, and that's a pretty dark, the yellow is pretty dark. And then I got the one from the stencil that directly onto the paper, and then I'm going to use another one and put another one on there. So out of that one print, I got 3 prints. So I love it when that happens. Now it's not very dark. I don't think I ended up using that one in the end, but I saved them and I may use them for other projects. So this is the other stencil. It's really hard to see because it's transparency sheets, but once the paint gets on it, then you can really see them. And I don't really clean those off. I let the paint dry on it, and it sticks to it, and it makes your stencils thicker, and it makes them easier to use in the future. So I don't even clean those off. So there I've added that painted stencil onto a piece of paper. This is one of my favorites right there. I just think that's so pretty. And those stencils, I mean, you can see just cutting that out of paper and adding it to the front of a card would be pretty. And that's another one that I just really loved, and it's kind of got that yellow background, and then I put that bronze colored paint over the top, and it just sparkles and shines, and I just love that floral pattern. It's so pretty. So then I'm bringing in some red, which I haven't used yet in this project, and I just put the paint down, and then I put the stencil over the top, and so the only paint that's going to get on that piece of paper is what's coming through the stencil. Then you take the stencil off there, and I added it to that one, and you really can't see it very well on that printing. So that's one that gets layered over and over. So I'm just trying to think here what I want to do, and I go back to that red because I really liked that, and then I'm using the same stencil again, and there I'm going to wipe off, and that is a scrap paper now, but I will use that in a journal or something. I don't throw these things away. Like, I will keep all of those clean off sheets and use them in other projects. So there, that one just is a muddy mess, which I was very disappointed. You don't always know how these are going to turn out. You may have an idea and you think, well, I'll use this paint, this is going to be great, and it doesn't turn out very good. But the thing with paint, you can just paint over it, or use it for something else, or throw it away if it doesn't work out. That's why I had more than I needed, because I knew I wasn't going to want to use every single one of them. So on this one I end up getting 3 out of as well, because I'm using that stencil onto another piece of paper. But again, I don't think I ended up using that one in my final projects, but I did save it. So there, I've painted that onto another background. I wasn't really crazy about that one either, but hey, it doesn't matter. Just going to keep going. And then I put white on it, and that's what I end up using on that one that was all dark and muddy looking, and it ends up being one that I use in the end. It's probably not one of my favorites, but it's not horrible either. Now that's one of my favorites right there. But then I peel that up, and then I put that on that dark one that was above, so muddy, and it turns out not too bad. So don't give up just because something you do doesn't turn out the way you think it should the first time. Just save it and paint over it. Honestly, of all the things that I ever do crafty, mono printing is something that just gives me so much joy. It is just so fun to play in the paint. And so I usually keep a little tub of water in my craft room, and I put a little bit of dish soap and a little bit of Murphy's oil soap in it, and then I just put like my paint, any kind of things that I use, found objects that I want to drag through the paint to make marks or make patterns, and I just put it in that dish pan of soapy water, and it comes right off. And then I just clean everything when I'm done, and I clean up that gelatin plate with actually hand sanitizer, and then I coat it with some baby oil and put it away, and I keep it in its original packaging. So now I am using foil papers and glitter papers, and I'm matting all of those. I'm the card fronts that I made, and I'm matting them before I adhere them to the cards. So I'm just picking out some of the things that I cut out um, that will go with the papers themselves. And I actually made these. Let's see. I knew what patterns I wanted on front of my cards, but I didn't pick out the colors until I was completely done. And so I was able to match up like the yellow. I used some yellow cardstock on that card that was yellow and blue, and the like that one that's the bright yellow with the orange, I picked red glitter paper with yellow. So I made those match kind of the card fronts after the fact. And so you're just watching with me as I trim those down a little bit so that I can make it them matted and so that they'll fit on the front of a card. Now that is the word set that came with the Flower Market bundle. So when you buy a Cricut cartridge through Close to My Heart, you get 3 stamp sets and a package of paper. I think you get some daisy white cardstock and then the cartridge. And so that was one of the stamp sets that came with the Flower Market set, and it's got a lot of really nice sayings on it. And so I'm using some of those sayings on all of these cards. So on all of these layers, when I was adhering my cardstock onto glitter paper, I used the liquid glass. It's a glue that comes in a bottle, because I felt like I wasn't sure that the tape or even the dual action glue pen would stick to that glitter paper, but I knew that that liquid glass would. And then on those foil cutouts, I wanted those raised up a little bit, and so I used the foam dots to make those raised. And I have the foam tape, but I just thought that these dots would be easier to use. Those are also available through Close to My Heart. So I'm using some of the gold there to matte some of my words, and I ended up using embossing. So I'm heat embossing, and I'm using the Ranger's Superfine White embossing powder and the Versamark ink to emboss these, and then using my heat gun. And then I just kind of cut those to fit. And I'm going to be using some 3D foam tape to give a little bit extra dimension to that word there. And that sticks on that foil really well. And so I just put one glue dot on that flower because I wanted those little frond things to be sticking up and not really glued down. But that one little glue dot is enough to hold it on. And then I glued the whole thing on the front of that with the dual action glue pen, because I didn't think I would have any trouble gluing the foil paper onto the mono printed paper. So I used a wide variety of adhesives in these projects, from 3D foam tape to the 3D foam dots. Then I used liquid glass and the dual action glue pen. So I used them all, and I think all of them are good adhesives and they all have good purposes, and I like having a variety of adhesives in my arsenal. So there, I'm using the liquid glass on that one because it's going to be glued on that foil, and I just felt like that was a good fit. And the liquid glass is a sparkly glue, and if it sticks out, it will be shiny. But since it's on with the glitter paper, I felt like even if a little bit of that did stick out, if it squished out when I glued it down, it wouldn't show up. So I didn't mind that, and it's a really good adhesive. Here I'm using the dual action glue pen, and that's some sparkle paper or the glitter paper, and I put that on a Canary Cardstock oval, and then I'm just layering these up, and I felt like it needed a little band across it, and I wanted it to be the same width as the inside paper instead of going to the outer edges of the yellow mat. And then I decided to use some foam tape to raise that up a little bit for some added dimension. And here I'm using that liquid glass again because I'm putting it on that glitter paper, and I just felt like it would work better. There I'm using my scissors to cut those little circles in half, because on the first one I felt like you could kind of see the those little dots through some of the cracks in the flowers. So I thought if I cut those in half, they would fit around the petals of some of the flowers better, and maybe it wouldn't be so obvious looking down into it that there was a foam tape back there. And I think it worked pretty good. So I used some of the sentiments on these. I repeated. They're probably not all going to go to the same person, and it didn't really matter. And so I used some of the same sentiments on these. And so this pretty much, as this is the last card that I did. And I'll show all of the cards again at the end of this video, and I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you'll give mono printing a chance, because it is a lot of fun. And those things are not available through Close to My Heart. You can get those things from Amazon, and but all of the rest of the Close to My Heart products you could get from my website. So I will put links below to all the products. So thank you.